Everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss Claire Redfield, my second favorite character in Resident Evil. If you didn't see the last one, my favorite character is Jill. You guys can check that out as I went through that whole process of why I love her and where the F has she been all this time. And you're gonna hear that again. You're probably gonna hear it a lot with every character that I want to discuss, because the only person you probably know is effing Leon and possibly Chris, because that's just how they've been doing it lately. But Claire Redfield, of course, the sister to Chris Redfield, the man with the guns, i.e. his arms. I love that character. I've loved her for a long time. You know, obviously she was in Resident Evil 2, whether it's the OG game or the 2 remake. I will never forgive them for messing up her costume in the 2 remake, because that's super effing annoying, but that's just something that they've done with all the remake costumes, where they're like, here's the original, and it's like, well, that's not what the original costume looked like. Why would you say that? So, with that said, because I'm not going to stick on that, because I've mentioned that who knows how many times throughout this series. Just sticking with Claire Redfield, of course, she came into things as the second version of a character, Elza Walker, from Resident Evil 1.5, as we call it these days. If you played the Resident Evil 2 remake, that crazy costume that she got, I think they just called it Elza. I think they just straight up used her actual name and just called it Elza, the Elza Walker costume, which is super cool. But it's like the full-on like motorcycle outfit where she's got all the different brands and stuff, like she's a racer, because she was meant to be a racer. That's why it was a racing uniform. So if you ever use that crazy uniform, that is literally based on the original character that was going to be in Resident Evil 2 before they ended up scrapping the whole thing. So Claire is actually the second iteration of the secondary character. Leon was always Leon, but it was a different character before it was Claire. Of course, this is more for the newbies that didn't actually know any of that stuff, because you wouldn't really get that information. You probably heard it a million times if you're watching this, of course, because it's been a Resident Evil frenzy, which has been like the greatest 2 months on YouTube of my life, because I'm like, man, it's nothing but Resident Evil content. And the game ended up being really good. People love Requiem, so I'm like, this is fantastic. It's just nothing. It's still nothing but more content. And I'm like, this is great. So it's fantastic for me. So odds are a lot of people who haven't played the OG games are either arguing online and stuff about how the OG games have the tank controls and stuff. I kind of referenced that in the last episode, but a lot of people are realizing maybe I should actually just play the effing games and see what it's all about. So that's really good. People are seeing a lot more footage of the OG trilogy, and obviously a lot of people, such as myself, are hoping for a Code Veronica remake, because Claire needs her moment. Everybody's like, just, oh my God, I gotta suck Leon's dick all the time. I get it. Even Capcom does it now, because they just won't let anybody have the spotlight. All the FNCG movies is him. But I'm like, Claire was right there. Claire was with Leon too. And she actually got a game before he did. It didn't change the world or anything, but that game was also effing amazing. Like, she was doing all the crazy cool stuff that people love Leon for before he was doing it. She's outrunning helicopters and stuff. Like, this is like 3 months after RE2, by the way. It's like a 19-year-old young woman using her very healthy kneecaps to outrun gunfire from a helicopter. Like, she was doing some crazy stuff in that game. And then Chris shows up again, and he was doing some crazy stuff in that game. He's like rock climbing up the side of a mountain with no gear. He was just free climbing it. I'm like, this is nuts. Like, both of them are actually insanely cool in that game. And that's also where Wesker ends up coming in. Like, there's a whole lot to Code Veronica that I'm seeing a lot of people. That's one of my favorite things, with the whole fervor of Requiem and 30-year anniversary. A lot of people are finally experiencing these older games, and a buttload of people are like, this Code Veronica thing is actually pretty sick. Like, people are recognizing my favorite score. Like, I know I'm jumping ahead, obviously, with Claire and being in RE2, but her in Code Veronica is the junk. Like, I love her in RE2. She has some of my favorite unlockables in the whole franchise in RE2, which is her like denim costume with the flames. I love that outfit. And then getting the single action army, that's a really cool unlockable for her. I love her unlockables way more than Leon's, because I think his kind of suck. But I put the effort in when it comes to Claire's. Like, I actually like that costume, plus I get a cool new handgun. So that I always thought was super cool. Her connection to Sherry I always thought was really nice, even though that's been a whole weird thing where it's like, she just abandoned them and stuff, and it's like, that's not really what happened. She went to find her brother, which is like, an appropriate thing to do, is to like, hey, I have to go find my brother, because we just went through some crazy stuff. I gotta make sure he's good too. Like, you guys are good here. Like, she gotta find her brother. Like, you gotta be honest. Like, she still had to find her brother. That was the whole point. So I think it was kind of oddly unfair that people are like, yeah, she just abandoned them. It's like, that's factually untrue in general, because they reference it that they've run into each other in other games. But just factually untrue. It's like, she can't go find her brother still. Like, that's a little weird to say that that's a bad thing to do. But anyway, Resident Evil 2 comes out. There's this random lady. You got Leon in his blue. Claire in red. They chose like the most basic opposite color scheme ever. It was like one character blue, one character red. Perfect. I always loved her costume from, honestly, from her first 2 appearances. Like her being in the vest, I always thought was such a cool feature of her character that was super unique. Whereas like she got the biker jacket and stuff. And I was like, I love this. Like this looks super cool. She had the red outfit with the red shorts even, and like I guess it would be Spanx or something underneath the black Spanx. And I was like, that's a really cool color scheme. They did like, a full black and red, even though in some promotional art, it'll definitely look pink. You play the OG games. They were so vibrant. Sometimes it was more pink than it was like actually red. And as a kid, I definitely thought it was a onesie. I know I mentioned that before, but as a kid, I didn't understand the separation of the polygons. I basically thought she just had like a crazy like vest romper type deal going on. I didn't really comprehend it because I'm like, I've never seen pink shorts before a day in my life. So as a kid, I was just like, oh, she's just got like one whole pink outfit on. That's a crazy look, but it still came out looking pretty sick. In all honesty, I was like, that's a crazy thing to wear, but it looks pretty cool. But it's like, okay. And they've changed it up over time, which honestly, I'm super curious what they're gonna end up doing for, eventually when they do reveal this Code Veronica remake. I'm super curious about that. But her outfit in 2 was the vest and the shorts, and then they redid that for the Umbrella Chronicles, or Darkside Chronicles, sorry, and they changed her shorts to like blue jean shorts, I guess, to make it look, quote unquote more realistic, I guess. I don't really know. I always thought it was super weird. I was like, why would they even bother changing that, especially for Darkside Chronicles? It's almost weird. I don't hate it, don't get me wrong. Like, it's an interesting look, but I prefer her OG look where it's like, hey, give her the red shorts plus the red vest. Like, I think that looks cooler. Her having the blue shorts that they did in Darkside Chronicles, not that it looks bad, it's just the fact that it's like, it looks more normal. Like that's something I could see someone wear. Like she was rocking the Daisy Dukes and put Spanx under them. And it was like, okay, it's like I can understand that because they're blue jeans that, it makes way more, it's way more, like I said, common or normal to see like just blue jean shorts than red jean shorts, which I've, once again, never seen a day in my life in real life. But it's just not as cool. Like you can't tell me it's like it doesn't stand out a little bit more that she went full red. Like that's a bold look. Like let's be honest. Like her putting on the blue jean shorts is like, it was almost like she was scared to rock it, Like just give her the full red. So I don't know why they did it, but I assume it had to be like, it doesn't look as cool, where they felt like it just didn't work as well to make it into blue jeans or specifically red jeans. But either way, I'm still more of like an OG original RE2 look. I don't hate it. Like I said, I don't hate the look that they changed it to in Code Veronica or in the Darkside Chronicles version of RE2. But I prefer her OG look. And then of course, in Code Veronica, I thought she looked awesome as well. And it was like, here's a different vest. And then instead of having the shorts, she had pants. So they dropped the gloves. I don't think she has any gloves at all in Code Veronica, if I'm not mistaken. But they dropped the gloves, they gave her the vest, and then they gave her some pants. And she still looks cool in that too. And also like her main, like I always see her and I'm like, the main pose is her doing like that dual wield pose. That's what the first image in my head when I think of Claire and Code Veronica, it's that dual wielding pose, which was another huge thing for that game. It was the first time you could shoot 2 enemies at once, and certain weapons, like I forgot the name of those guns, but the gold Lugers, or you could aim 2 gold Lugers, man, those guns legit were like the item of all items when I was a kid. I was like, I want these gold Lugers so bad. I wanted them in game. I wanted them in real life. Like I'd never seen gold guns outside of like 007, like the golden gun from 007 has nothing on the gold Lugers. Like the golden gun is just like, it's like a gold, if I'm not mistaken, it's a golden Desert Eagle. That's not bad. Desert Eagles do look pretty sick, but it had nothing on like 2 twin gold Lugers. I wanted those so bad as a kid. I was like, man, these 2 gold guns are like all of existence for me right now. Like they look so cool. And like every time I played that game, I was like, I wish you could just have the gold Lugers, but you have to, usual thing, I'm pretty sure you can get them at some point and you can get ammo for them somehow. It's like some unlockable stuff. Because they show on the game, like when you get them from Steve, they show that there's a 0 symbol for the bullets. So you can get bullets for them somehow, some way. I just never figured that out as a kid. I'm sure it's one of those deep unlockables, infinite weapon ammo type of deals. But as a kid, I was just like, I want to be able to shoot these gold Lugers so bad. But I do love those guns, and that ties more into Steve. But for Claire, she was just super cool. Like she was just doing what she was doing, fighting tyrants and stuff on airplanes, which everybody hates that fight because it is a real out of nowhere fight. You do not see that one coming. And that one, that's where the difficulty comes in when it comes to Code Veronica And I always thought that was interesting. I was like, I have never once in my life had a problem thinking that Code Veronica was hard. But everyone's been saying it, like, Code Veronica is the hardest, like, of the OG Resident Evil games. I'm like, at no point did I experience any sense of hard when it came to Code Veronica. So I find that super funny that people have been saying that, because I'm like, I did not find that game difficult. Like, outside of, certain specific parts where it's like, oh, you fighting the Bandersnatch, for sure, those guys are douchebags. They can hit you from across the screen. Or, it's not like old Resident Evil where it's like, I think there's a zombie. You be like, I think, bow, and they slap you right in the face. And it's like, I'm sure now that something's over there, because it just rocked me a little bit. So Bandersnatches, not my favorite. Like, they suck. Led to one of the greatest cutscenes on planet Earth, though, with Steve jumping through a plane glass window with 2 gold Lugers. Once again, yet another moment where I'm like, hey, people act like RE4 was where it all went off, but it's like, you guys just didn't play Code Veronica, because they had dudes jumping through windows that straight up should have killed this man. You can't just jump through glass. That does not work. But he did it anyway. He jumped through glass, shot like 2 bullets in the air, did a tuck and roll like it was nothing, hopped right back up. Once again, these are young people bones, I guess. And then he just starts dual wielding 2 gold Lugers, and he just shoots up the Bandersnatch. And it's like the first one that you ever see. It's like the introduction to the Bandersnatch. And it was like, okay, this is pretty awesome. And at that point, you also get the submachine guns. Like, you get to trade with him, and he gets the submachine guns, and then you go and you clear out this area as you're playing with Steve. And it's like, boom, 2 submachine guns, and it's just fun. Once again, dual wielding, something that you just don't get in any of the other games. So, an amazing element to that game. But Claire, as a person, is super cool in that. Like, she's incredibly badass, and like I said, so is Chris. It's just really like an overall, when you really put it down, it's like, that's honestly one of the most badass Resident Evil games there is. Like, there's a ton of horror to it, but cutscene wise is where all the action is. Like, how a lot of people be like, oh, Resident Evil 3 is where they started to go more action. Code Veronica has a buttload of action. They just put it in the cutscenes, and especially in, like, the Code Veronica X version, because Wesker wasn't in it as much. But Claire's all over the place, just doing cool stuff. Like, when she fights a tyrant, one of the hardest battles in the whole game, you gotta fight a tyrant on the back of a plane, and then she's just like, it was just a bug I had to step on, or something like that. Like, she's like super insanely chill, and I'm like, man, she's so cool. She's so cool. So I love Claire for that. Like Code Veronica, I played the crap out of that. I played the crap out of 2. But I think because Code Veronica was like the PS2 Resident Evil game, I played that for a super long time, at least a couple years before RE4, ended up coming out. So my only game for a super long time was me playing on the PS2, and I was only playing Code Veronica. I could have been playing, Resident Evil 1 and 2 again if I wanted to, but at the time it was like, all right, I've finished my PlayStation. I have a PlayStation 2, so I was only playing PS2 games. I wasn't like playing my old PS1 games on my PS2. So Resident Evil only existed as Code Veronica for a super long time, and Claire was back, and I was like, I'd already loved Claire from 2. So for me, it was really awesome because I had 1 and then 2, and it was like, all right, well, Claire became my second favorite character, Jill being my first. 3 comes out, I get my favorite character back with Jill, and then the very next game is Code Veronica, and it was like, cool, I get Claire back again. And it was really great at the time. Like, if I only knew that was basically it would basically be like the last time I'd ever see them. It's kind of how it feels, because even now it's like, okay, Claire got Resident Evil Revelations 2, which I think is great. A lot of people say it sucks. Those people are crazy. If you think 2 sucks, I don't know what's wrong with you. Like, that game's absolutely amazing. But she got Revelations 2, and she's in quite a few of the CG movies. I think she's in 3 of the CG films, including the very first one. It's her and Leon again. So it's like, okay, Claire seemed like she was getting some representation, and then it kind of just transitioned to just straight up being Leon and other characters show up. But she at least had something. Like, we still don't have anything as far as the games are concerned, which really blows. And I still think that there's just stuff where it's like, man, what the F are they doing? Whatever the next new game is going to be, a part of me is like, I would hope Claire shows up, because they're going to be like, hey, we already did her again. Let's put her back in, into the next mainline title. They did it with Leon, where it was like, 4 came out, and then 9 was the next game with him again. So maybe if the next remake, which, everyone's saying, all the leaks and stuff, but even long before that, I was like, it should be Code Veronica because of all the Wesker stuff. If we get to see Claire come back for the Code Veronica remake, hopefully that means the next mainline game, she'll at least be in it. I don't think it means that she'll be the main character, but at least she'll be in it, is my hope. Obviously, her model would be different, but it might be something to it. I honestly think Code Veronica, especially, it depends on how they change it, because that's the interesting thing. I can't wait to see the remake of that, and then when people go back to it and like play the original, and everyone that isn't doing it right now, I should say, them experiencing that for the first time and being like, oh, this game was actually kind of crazy. Like RE4 was crazy too, and like you could do suplexes and stuff. So even in game, it added to that element. But if you just play Code Veronica, it's like, this is kind of nuts. Like, this whole island is blowing up. You got Wesker running around. He's doing uppercuts on Chris and junk. He's running on walls, fighting enemies. Claire is dodging gunfire in the intro to the effing game. It genuinely is like the coolest intro that they've ever had to like any Resident Evil game. So, I don't know. Like, something about that is, and once again, the intro I'm sure will be slightly different, but they shouldn't really change it. Like, let her run from gunfire. Let us experience her running from a helicopter gunfire and then doing a cool like drop shot on a container behind a bunch of bad guys. That would be very cool. In fact, the intro is so cool that the end of the second live action Resident Evil movie stole the whole intro to the game. Like, they just throw Alice in there, of course, like she's running down the building and stuff. That part is extra. But her running through the building with the helicopter firing on her and stuff like that, I'm like, that's straight up Code Veronica. Also, and this was something it took me over a decade to realize, the character that Mike Epps plays in that movie has 2 gold guns, which I believe are Desert Eagles, actually. And I always thought that was the stupidest thing in the world. And, I kind of just hate the second movie because they put Mike Epps in, and I was like, you can't have super funny Mike Epps in a Resident Evil movie. I hated that so much. And it took me over a decade to realize his 2 gold guns have to be a reference to the gold Lugers of Code Veronica. Like, they have the entire intro as the ending action sequence. Of course, the gold guns are a reference to the gold Lugers in Code Veronica. I just never noticed that as a kid. Like, it never dawned on me. I was like, it was just, why does he have 2 gold guns? That's super stupid. It's still dumb in the context of the film, but as a reference, I can now somewhat respect it, even though I really don't like that, that second movie. But I was like, oh, it took me forever to finally put 2 and 2 together on that one. But Mike Epps' character has 2 gold guns, and that is based on the gold Lugers from Code Veronica. So Code Veronica has some really good stuff in it, and obviously that was before 4 ever even came out. They already had stuff that they could take from the games, specifically in terms of action. And one of those moments was the straight up intro to Code Veronica. So Code Veronica is a very important game in the franchise, so much so that it even got like a full steal, from the films, where they're like, we'll just take this whole action sequence because that's actually kind of awesome. So Code Veronica is very important, and I think Claire will get the recognition that she deserves when that game comes out. And of course, they'll probably make it more serious. The rumors have been like they're probably going to do that split situation between the characters again, which I'd be very curious if that was the case, because that would be a heck of a remake. Because in the original game for Code Veronica, there is no switching back and forth where you choose. Like, it's just you play a bunch as Claire, then you play a bunch as Chris, and then it really kind of does what Resident Evil 9 already does, but you don't get to choose. Like, the game just switches back and forth. So oddly enough, if that is the next remake, it'll be interesting to see how they handle it, because I don't think, and once again, this is like the more recent rumors where they're like, yeah, they're going to make it scarier as Claire, but more action-based with Chris. And I'm like, you don't have to do that. This wasn't PS5, or not, I don't know, I said PS5. This isn't Resident Evil 5 Chris. This isn't Boulder Punching Chris. This is still, like, in my personal opinion, this is still better Chris. Also, in my favorite costume, by the way. That is my favorite outfit for Chris is the Code Veronica outfit. And then we can do RE5, because that is a good, that's become like his standard costume. But my favorite was always, if it wasn't like the original vibrant green OG Chris outfit, it's definitely the Code Veronica outfit. I always thought that was super cool. I always thought he was in basically jet black back in the day, but he does have a green shirt on underneath the black vest. I always thought that was kind of sick though. That was always my favorite costume of his when I was younger. But for Claire, not only cool costume, but a bunch of cool actions. She has dual wielding. Like, I'm curious how that's going to come back as well, because that was a huge part of that game. It was somewhat of a gimmick, because it really was only like, you get like 2 types of weapons that can do it. You have like your I think they were like semi-automatic pistols. I think that's what they were. They look like machine guns, but they're like semi-pistols or something like that. And then you, at some point, get the actual submachine guns. And then I think you get ammo for those at like one point, the part where you play as Steve. And then after that, you get them like one other time, like way down the line. So you really don't get to dual wield as much as they make it seem, where it's like, holy crap, you dual wield. Once you run out of those bullets, I don't think the semi-automatic pistols actually use regular handgun ammo. I think they have their own ammo. And then of course the submachine guns have submachine gun ammo. So, you know, it's not something you really do that often, but it's still pretty cool. So they might, you know, make a bigger deal out of that, which would be amazing. And of course, as soon as that bad boy gets a VR update, the first thing I'm gonna do is hit the dual wielding pose. Like I'm just waiting for that one. But Claire Redfield is absolutely amazing. I basically spent this whole time just talking about her and Code Veronica because that's really where I spent most of my time with her. But her in the CG movies, I thought she was pretty cool, like her couple of appearances that she has. And then after years upon years upon years of nothing, after, you know, Code Veronica, we finally got something with Claire in Resident Evil Revelations 2. She did make an appearance before that because she was in the Mercenaries 3D on 3DS, which was pretty cool, and that used her Code Veronica outfit. It may have had both, but I always saw her Code Veronica costume, so I don't know if she had her alternates in there too. But that was really it. That was like the first thing we saw, and that was when RE5 came out, and it was still years after that before, you know, Revelations 2 finally came out. And it was like, oh, they're finally bringing back Claire, and this was adult Claire. And that was when I was like, oh, you know, she has like the full, like the leather jacket she has in the RE2 remake is basically what she has in Revelations 2. That's pretty much where that comes from. Like she had, I'm trying to actually remember if, yeah, so that came out, the first movie she was in, because she's been in 3. The first one was the very first movie, it was Damnation. She basically has like a white jacket, but I think she has like a red shirt or something underneath it. And that was kind of her costume for the movie. The second thing she showed up in, she had the red leather jacket, but that was after Revelations 2 came out. And it was like, okay, adult Claire just full on has a red leather jacket. Like that's her thing now. She no longer has the vest, so that was RE2 and Code Veronica. And then after that, it was like, hey, we'll keep her style, but instead of it being, you know, a biker vest, she's in these professional settings now. We'll give her the red leather jacket. And that's kind of been her steady costume as an adult ever since. That was a huge issue for me when the Resident Evil 2 remake came out. And I've talked about this a million times over, so I'm not gonna harp on it forever. But that's why I hated that so much, where they gave her the leather jacket. And I was like, no, leather jacket is for adult Claire. And the only, like, she only has 2 appearances with a vest. Like it really was like, it was more so that than anything else, where it was like, teen Claire gets the vest because she's like a teenager, she's a biker, like that's her thing. You give her the vest for the only 2 games she even has the effing thing in. Give her the vest, and then you can give her the jackets as the older version of herself. And so that really bugged me when the RE2 remake came out. And then of course, the quote unquote original costume obviously wasn't her original costume. Although I recently saw that someone mentioned, like when they were showing early footage of RE2 remake, she was in the vest and the pants, and they believed that that was going to be her remake costume, which would have been fine if it was like her OG costume but redesigned, just like Leon from RE4. It's like, okay, it's basically his RE4 costume, they just changed the jacket. If that were the case for 2, that would have been totally fine. And it's like, it's a redone version of the vest. It doesn't look the same, but it is the vest and stuff. It's like, all right, that's cool. You know, she still got the red pants and everything. It's just different. No gloves, no black t-shirt. Doesn't look as cool, but it would still be a remade version and it would make sense. But when they call it the original, it sucks. So I'm super worried about her and Code Veronica, because I'm like, I don't think they're even gonna give her the vest as her regular costume. And if they do, somehow they'll screw it up. It's just one vest and a pair of pants. And I'm like, somehow they're gonna mess that up, because they keep doing that with all the OG costumes. So we'll see what happens with that. But Claire needs to have her time. She needs to have some recognition, because I mentioned this at the end of the Jill episode, and this is how I'm gonna end this out. They better be making Code Veronica as the next remake, because Capcom is so crappy to her that they literally did not put her in any of the merch for the 30th anniversary. They put the dog in there. They got Dr. Salvador. I know Lady D with the triple Ds is of course gonna be all over merch. People are still horny about that. That's fine. I'll give you that one. But they didn't put Claire Redfield in there. That's insane. That's just utterly insane. You know, I always consider Jill like the first lady of Resident Evil, but technically Claire would be like the third lady of Resident Evil, because you can play as Rebecca. But she's the second main protagonist, second main, you know, female protagonist of the franchise. And that does mean something. Also, she's the younger sister to Chris Redfield. Like, she has a really cool connection as a character because they're the only characters in the whole franchise that are related. Minus characters that are being like, hey, I have family. They're all dead though. Like, everyone that has a relation to somebody else is dead. They're the only two characters where it's like, hey, it's Chris and Claire. They're both still alive, thank God. And they're the only ones that are actually siblings. Everybody else is just like, we're friends, or I had family, or you watch their family die in the actual game. Like, that's it. They're the only ones that have just been related and just kind of stayed that way. Other than that, you have, like, Barry and Moira would be the only two characters that actually have, you know, and of course that took like a million years because they were referenced in the first game, Barry's kids, but she is playable in Revelations 2. So, granted, I don't know if we'll ever see Moira again. I don't even know if we'll see Barry again if we're going off of age. So it's kind of like within the actual franchise, they exist. So they're like the second pair, but I don't know if we should ever expect them to really like show up again. And that's unfortunate. But Chris and Claire are like the only pair that are just like, we're out and about still doing our thing. And we're also related. That's cool. I would also love to see them in the actual game again. That would be pretty sick, but we'll probably just have to settle for the remake. And then we will wait and see what ends up happening with whatever RE10 is gonna be. If they're gonna be like, hey, this is actually the one where we bring everybody in. But we'll just have to wait and see on that. But Claire needs her recognition because she is cool. She's just, honestly, I probably can't say she's just as cool as Leon. I can't say that because they've given Leon like all of the most impossible things where like he'll get punched by a tyrant and stuff like that. Like, he's done things just like Chris. Like, both of them have done the fakest things in the whole franchise, whether it's fighting, you know, punching boulders or doing what Leon did in, what was that, Vendetta? Or I think it was Vendetta. It was the crazy motorcycle sequence with the dogs. So all of the crazy stuff that the two of them have done has just been like insane. And Claire running from like helicopter fire is like, that's just super cool. It doesn't feel overly fake. It's insane, but it doesn't feel too fake, you know? Punching a boulder, insane. Taking a hit from a tyrant, absolutely ridiculous. You know, parrying rockets and all the stuff that Leon could do. Even in RE4, he could do that, by the way. People are like, you know, he could parry everything. You can do that in RE4 too. I parried a rocket in RE4. I actually did it with Ada. But you can parry rockets in RE4 as well, if you didn't know that. So you can go back to the RE4 remake. It's exactly the same. You can parry just about everything. But Claire needs that recognition. Capcom is treating her like garbage. Like, I thought, you know, like everyone's like, you know, hey, dang, where are the girls at? You know, Jill is not to be seen, which is insane, but at least she was on the effing merch. At least they didn't forget the first lady. But Claire was just like nowhere to be found. Like, that's insane to me. Like, I know the chainsaw is like super famous. I know they got the chainsaw in RE9, but that does not mean you need to put Dr. Salvador, which, let's be honest, I'm saying the dude's name. How many people are gonna see the chainsaw guy and just say, oh, it's the chainsaw dude? Like, come on. How many people even care to know that that's the dude's name? Dr. Salvador, honestly. But you couldn't put Claire Redfield in some effing merch for the 30th anniversary? And we still haven't gotten the announcement, which I guess they're gonna do it at some sort of event or whatever, but it's like, come on. Y'all couldn't put anything out? No sort of announcement on the day of? Nothing specifically for Claire? Because it's super weird. Like, honestly, the fact that they put the merch out like the day before or like 2 days before the announcement and there was no Claire merch, I was like, that's almost so weird. It's suspiciously weird. Like, they have to be doing something, right? Because how can you not have Claire in any of the merch for the 30th anniversary? So they have to be saving something, right? Like, I know it ended, you know, of course it ended up being, you know, pure copium, if you will. But at that point, it, like I said, it's so suspicious. It has to mean you're about to make an announcement because it's Claire. And I'm not crazy. Like, I don't even have to ask, am I crazy? Because I know I'm not crazy when I say that. It's Claire Redfield. And it's almost suspicious that she's the only character that didn't get merch from like the OG games. You got Jill, Chris, Leon, even Ada was up in there. You know, no offense to Ada, but it's like side character. Grace was in it as the new character. It was like, okay, once again, Lady D, that's for the horny people. I totally understand. I'm in that crowd technically. But Dr. Salvador, they also had the Cerberus. Cerberus is also like one of the most, if it's not a straight up zombie, it's a Cerberus. And they also had the zombie in there too. Salvador is like the one where I'm like, the chainsaw guy shouldn't have been there. That should have been Claire. Everyone else, I'm like, okay, you get a zombie, you get a Cerberus. I totally understand. You got to have like some of the enemies in there. You get the two classics, zombie dog, zombie person. Lady D for the horny folk, Ada also kind of for the horny folk. Grace is the new character. Jill, Chris, Claire, Leon, first 4 main playable characters. That is how that should have been. But they put the effing chainsaw guy in there. And no Claire Redfield is utterly insane. Utterly insane. Like I said, it was so suspicious. It made me think even more so that they were gonna put her in there. But they did not. So Claire has no merch for 30 years. That's ridiculous. So nothing for Claire until the remake comes out, and then people will understand. And I swear to God, if they screw this up, I'm gonna be pissed. Because people just forget Claire because it's all about Leon because they made him like the face of the thing. It's all about Leon right now. But I'm telling you, if they just remake Code Veronica and it's as good as it was back in the day, Claire will get the recognition she deserves. Because the crazy stuff they do in that game is insanely cool. Like one of the boss fights is super weird where you're dodging sniper fire man, it sucks that they're not gonna have the crazy laugh in there. And I really do hope they, of course, keep the cross-dress and freak line because that was a really good one. But a lot of stuff you do in that game is pretty intense, and it's just like, this is crazy to watch. Just wild stuff happens in that game, and it's also very important, by the way. It's like super crucial to the plot line of the Resident Evil franchise, like way more so. Like people say like RE4 was kind of just like an offshoot and stuff. Code Veronica was the last one that was super important. It was like 1, 2, 3, and then Code Veronica, and then after that, it was kind of just like the weird offshoots. Of course, you have Outbreak, which would be a prequel. But after that, it was like, all right, 4 was just like, yeah, Umbrella's dead, and then they kind of just went about their business, and then found ways to sneak Umbrella back in there with Tricell and 5, and going further, even now up to 9. But Code Veronica was like super crucial. And there's a lot they can do with Code Veronica as well, because Hunk grew up on the island that the game takes place in. So they could bring Hunk into the game if they're doing, just little additional stuff for the remakes. But I'm excited to see what happens. Claire needs her recognition. She's an amazing character that has sadly only been in 3 effing games. Like that really blows. So we'll see what ends up happening. 4 total, of course, if you're counting the RE2 remake. But even then, it's just like, man. There's just nothing. We just get nothing with her character, and she's absolutely amazing. And she does a lot of stuff. Like she's with a anti-bioterrorism group, which everybody is. Which it's another one of those things where like nobody shows. It's not like the Avengers, where it's like, why aren't these characters here? Like everyone should always be in the same stuff. Everybody's doing the same thing, but they never show up in games together. It's like all you guys do is fight bioterrorism. Why aren't you all always here? But either way, hoping the Code Veronica remake gets Claire the recognition she deserves. And I'm super curious what it's going to do for Chris fans because of him being in 8 the way that he was. I'm very curious about that because he's a different dude in Code Veronica, because that was before 5 came out. That was like, still he had muscle and stuff, but he was like slim fit. He wasn't, big, punching boulders fit. So it'll be interesting to see how they categorize his character. And that's why I really hope they don't go too hard with the action, because he wasn't full BSAA military style with that. He was still more of like a cop doing super cop stuff. He didn't go like full military transition yet. So I'm kind of waiting to see how that one turns out. But Claire needs her recognition. It's been utterly ridiculous and utterly insane how they've been treating her, especially with the 30th anniversary. Like it was one thing where it was like she was in the same category as Jill, where it was like, where are the ladies? Like, please put them in the games. But for them to legit have her as the one main character, at least, from the first 2 games, that just doesn't show up. They got Ada in there, but they didn't put Claire. That's insanely disrespectful. Like, that's crazy to me. But that's how Capcom is treating her right now. So for the Claire fans out there, I'm with you. She's my number 2. But there's some times where I think about it, I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes Claire might be my number 1. Sometimes I think about it and how attached I am to Code Veronica and just how cool she really is. Sometimes I'm like, she did do more than Jill when it comes to certain moments. But then you gotta think, RE3, that's pretty badass too. It wasn't in cutscene form, it was in gameplay, so it may not have looked as cool when I was getting punched all the time. But Jill did some insanely cool stuff as well. But I don't know. Claire Redfield, she's one of the best, even though we haven't seen her in 100 million years. I hope this remake does what it's supposed to do. I hope it's fantastic. I hope all the rumors are true, where it's like, hey, it's done by the people that did the 2 and 4 remake, so they actually give it the time it deserves. It's already a long game as well. That's another thing. It was already the longest one out of the OG games, for them that didn't know that. So that'll be really interesting as well, because you're gonna spend time with the characters, and that's another thing that helps you either attach to them or hate them if you just don't like how they're done. But we'll see with the remake. But either way, Claire Redfield, she's awesome. She better have an effing vest, and if they don't do that, then they need to at least make the OG costume the actual OG costume. And this is super random, but they need to bring back the PS1 blocky stuff. I know they couldn't do that for RE4 because obviously that was like GameCube and PS2, so it wouldn't be exactly the same, but they can do it for Code Veronica. They should have done it for 3 and had like the PS1 blocky thing. They can do it for Code Veronica though, because even though that was PS2, it was still early enough where it was like, especially because it came out on Dreamcast, so it was kind of like slightly up-res, but that still has like a slightly, it's better. It's definitely better. It's not nearly as blocky, but it's like slightly. It's just right on the cusp of that. And 4 was like a full transition because it came out later enough. But like Code Veronica was like still like 4 or 5 years before that, and it was like just in that window of being like, they could do it. They could do it. And plus, they could just make PS1 blocks of the characters like they did for RE6. I think of that all the time. I'm like, they don't even have to have actual PS1 renders. It's not like they're taking them. They're just making them look like it. I wish they would do that in general, because if it's a third-person game, make a PS1 blocky version. They just should. But we'll see what happens with Claire, with her costume, with her representation, and the love from the community. We'll see what everybody does when this Code Veronica remake officially gets an announcement. But either way, I'm going to be happy to see her again. Even though it won't be new stuff, it'll be great to see Claire in general. And then, of course, I'm hoping that she would show up in the next game, because that would be awesome to see her older. And of course, Jill as well. But we'd love to know your thoughts on all things Claire Redfield, whether you like her, don't like her, if you're a new fan, how you guys feel about her, if you're an OG fan, how you guys feel about her. Obviously, there's huge differences there for people that have only experienced her in literally one game, who haven't gone backwards to, either play Code Veronica or Revelations 2. Once again, not really a lot of things you can go back to. At least for Jill, it's like you can do 1, 3, 5. Even if you're just doing DLC, she has 2 separate DLC that you can play there, at least a couple hours worth of time with Jill, and you get Revelation. So like, she does have a significant boost over Claire that legit only has 3 straight up experiences. Like, Claire doesn't have like she popped up later and became DLC. Like, Claire doesn't get that. She got 2, she got Code Veronica, she got Revelations 2, and now she has the remake. So that's all you get for her, and 2 of those things are the same story. So it's unfortunate how little she really does get, and I'm sure a bunch of people aren't running to the CG movies, of course, to see more of her. But you should watch the CG movies in general, by the way, just to throw that out there. But like I said, for the 3rd time, would love to know your thoughts on all things Claire Redfield. So please put your comments down in the comment section below, and of course, thanks for watching.